It was supposed to be a normal visit. Just another Wednesday afternoon inside the sterile, echoing walls of Monroe State Correctional Facility. Guards were doing their usual rounds. Inmates lined up to meet the few family members who still bothered to visit. And in one of the small, windowless visitation rooms, a moment was about to unfold that would shake everyone to their core. Isaiah Monroe, a 27-year-old serving time for armed robbery, had been called out for a visitor. He didn't know who it was. No one had told him. The guard simply nodded and said, "You got someone waiting. Room 4. Isaiah didn't expect much. His family hadn't visited in months. His letters went unanswered. He figured it was some kind of mix-up. But as he walked into the room and saw the person waiting at the table, his breath caught in his throat. There she was, Marilyn Monroe. His mother. Or at least, that's who he thought she was. She was dressed in a loose gray coat, wearing oversized sunglasses that didn't quite hide the nervous look on her face. Her hands were shaking. But when she saw Isaiah, she forced a smile. "Hey, baby," she said softly. "It's been a long time." Isaiah stood frozen for a moment. A storm of emotions crashed over him. Confusion, disbelief, anger, relief. He hadn't seen her in years. She had disappeared from his life when he was a teenager, leaving behind nothing but questions. They sat down. The room was quiet, save for the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. "I didn't think you'd come," he finally muttered, his voice low. Marilyn nodded slowly. "I wasn't sure I should. But I had to see you. I needed to talk to you, face to face." And then came the moment. That impossible, incomprehensible moment. She reached into her coat pocket, pulled out a folded piece of paper, pushed it across the table to him. Isaiah stared at it. "What's this?" It's something I should have told you a long time ago," she said, her voice cracking. He opened the paper. His eyes scanned the words. And suddenly, his face changed. Shock, confusion, rage, disgust. He looked up at her like he didn't recognize the person sitting across from him. You're not my mother," he whispered. She tried to reach for his hand. "I was scared, Isaiah. I didn't know how to tell you." "You lied to me?" he screamed, loud enough for other inmates in nearby rooms to hear. Guards jumped to their feet. Something was wrong. Isaiah stood up so violently that the chair behind him crashed to the floor. His fists clenched, his chest heaving. And then, in one horrifying instant, he lunged across the table. What happened next was chaos. Screams. Blood. Shouts for backup. Guards rushed in. They tried to pull him off. But Isaiah had already done the unthinkable. He had killed her. Right there in the visitation room. In front of the guards. In front of the cameras. In front of everyone. And all he could do was scream. Over and over. "She lied to me. That's not my mother. That's not my mother." What could drive a man to murder the very person who gave him life? What secret had been buried for decades, so deep, so disturbing, that when it was finally brought to light, it shattered what little humanity he had left? This is the story of Isaiah Monroe. And the day everything he believed about his life, his past, and his own identity was violently ripped apart. They say every killer has a reason. Some kill for money, some for revenge. But Isaiah Monroe? He killed because the truth hurt more than any prison sentence ever could. After the blood-soaked chaos of the visitation room, Isaiah was dragged out, kicking and screaming, his face twisted in rage and heartbreak. The woman's body, motionless, lifeless, lay sprawled on the floor. Officers sealed off the area. Investigators swarmed in. But the truth wasn't just in what Isaiah had done. It was in why. The autopsy confirmed the woman's identity, Marilyn Monroe, age 51. On record, she had no criminal history, no outstanding warrants, no reason to be afraid. But her fingerprints told a different story. And when detectives dug deeper, the truth unraveled like a loose thread on a decades-old lie. Marilyn Monroe was born Marcus Darnell Walker, a man, assigned male at birth, raised in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, arrested once at age 19 for drug possession, then disappeared from all public records shortly after. No marriage license, no legal name change, no medical history under the name Marilyn, just vanished, until she reappeared nearly 2 decades later, presenting as a woman, a mother, raising Isaiah as her own. When Isaiah was a little boy, he only knew his mother as Marilyn. She was kind, strict, but protective. She worked long hours at a diner, came home tired, kissed him on the forehead, made sure he did his homework, taught him how to pray. But she was also secretive. There were no baby pictures of Isaiah as a newborn. No family members ever visited. No talk of a father or grandparents. And every time Isaiah asked questions, she would change the subject. He never understood why they moved so often. Why she never let him have sleepovers. Why she flinched whenever someone brought up the past. Now he knew. The letter Isaiah read in that visitation room? It was a confession. A desperate, last-ditch attempt by a parent to tell their child the truth before it was too late. In it, Marilyn explained everything. She had been born Marcus. But inside, she always felt like a woman. She never told anyone. Not her parents, not her church, not even Isaiah's biological mother, who died in childbirth. Isaiah was the result of a one-night stand. Marilyn, then still Marcus, had been with a woman just once. The pregnancy was a shock. The birth even more so. But when the mother died during labor, Marcus took the baby and left his old life behind. He raised Isaiah as Marilyn, not to lie to him, but to protect him. She didn't want her son growing up in shame. Didn't want him bullied for having a parent the world wouldn't understand. But in trying to protect him, she created a bomb that would one day explode. And it did. In that cold, silent prison visitation room. On a Wednesday afternoon. With no warning and no second chances. Now, Isaiah sat alone in solitary confinement. 24-hour lockdown. No windows. No visitors. No conversation. Just a metal sink, a toilet, and 4 gray walls closing in. He hadn't spoken since the murder. Hadn't eaten much. Wouldn't even talk to his lawyer. But one thing was certain. The man who had entered that visitation room as a son, left it as an orphan, by his own hand. Was it betrayal? Or was it trauma left untreated, unspoken, and buried under years of silence? One thing's for sure. Truth can set you free. But for some, it destroys everything. Inside Louisiana State Penitentiary, news spreads fast, faster than light, faster than guards can contain it. And Isaiah Monroe's crime? It didn't just spread. It exploded. By sundown, every tier in cell block C was buzzing with the same whispered question. Did you hear what he did in the visitation room? He killed his own mom. Nah, bro, that wasn't his mom. That was a man. In prison, truth becomes legend in minutes. And when that legend touches taboo, it becomes dangerous. Isaiah was no longer just another inmate doing 10 years for armed robbery. He was the guy who stabbed a transgender parent to death, right in front of correctional staff. And in a place where hypermasculinity, gang alliances, and unspoken rules run deeper than concrete walls, Isaiah's name was now inked in blood. Even before the murder, Isaiah had always struggled inside. He didn't join any crews, didn't run drugs, didn't play cards or trade commissary. He stayed quiet, kept to himself. But after what happened, silence wasn't an option anymore. He wasn't just weird now. He was targeted. To some inmates, Isaiah had committed the ultimate betrayal, killing someone who had raised him, even if she had lied. To others, he was a hero, a man who had handled business after discovering a sick truth. But none of that mattered, because in prison, no one cares about why you did it, only what you did. Warden Harris sat at his desk, flipping through Isaiah's new file, Murder 1. Inmate on civilian homicide. A red stamp across the top read, high risk, administrative segregation. Keep him locked down 23 hours a day, the warden ordered. No yard, no chow hall, no contact. If he gets touched, it's on us. But even in solitary, the walls have ears. And Isaiah? He wasn't just battling guilt. He was unraveling. Nightmares started on day 5. Visions of Marilyn, standing in that visitation room, her blouse soaked in blood. But in the dream, she didn't fall. She smiled. I still love you, she whispered. Even now. Isaiah would wake up screaming, pounding on the steel door, begging for someone, anyone, to talk to. But no one came. No therapy. No chaplain. Not even a lawyer visit. Just 4 cold walls, a flickering light, and a mind caving in on itself. Meanwhile, on the outside, the media had gotten wind of the case. Man kills transgender parent in prison visit. Prison bloodbath raises questions about identity, rage, and the system. Was this murder? Or a mental health breakdown? Cable news ran clips of Isaiah's mugshot. Commentators argued about transgender parenting, masculinity in prison, and whether Isaiah should be tried for a hate crime. But while the world debated, Isaiah sat in the dark, haunted by a truth too big to carry and too deadly to ignore. One afternoon, a prison nurse slipped a note under his door. No name, no handwriting, just 6 words, scribbled in pencil. She never stopped loving you, Isaiah. He read it once, then again, then broke down and cried until he couldn't breathe. Sometimes, monsters aren't born. They're built, one secret at a time. And sometimes, they're not monsters at all, just broken boys, left alone with the truth. It had been 43 days since the murder, since Isaiah Monroe's world collapsed with the sound of a scream and the taste of blood on his hands. And in that time, no lawyer had shown up. No trial date was set. No family called. Just silence. Except for the voice inside his head that wouldn't shut up. She lied to you. You killed your own mother. You're not a man. You're broken. The only person who visited was Detective Erin Caldwell. She wasn't with the prison. She was with the state, assigned to investigate whether what happened in that visitation room was a premeditated murder or something deeper. She sat across from Isaiah, a small tape recorder between them. Let's talk about Marilyn, she said. Tell me what you remember before it all went dark. Isaiah's hands trembled as he spoke. His voice cracked between words. She told me things I wasn't ready to hear. Like what? That she was never supposed to be a mom. That she only transitioned after having me. That the life I knew wasn't real. She'd been living a lie, and so had I. He paused. I looked into her eyes, and for a second, I didn't see her. I saw every person who ever lied to me. Every foster home. Every social worker. Every fake smile that promised me I was safe. He clenched his jaw. I snapped. Detective Caldwell leaned in. Isaiah, when she told you the truth, was she trying to hurt you? He shook his head slowly. No, she was trying to set me free. And that was the paradox. Marilyn's truth was meant to liberate him. But instead, it became a prison of its own. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, the district attorney's office was split. Half of them wanted first-degree murder with a hate crime enhancement. The other half saw something more complex. We're dealing with generational trauma, gender identity, and a system that failed both of them. And somewhere in the middle sat the question no one could answer. Is this justice or just tragedy? Back in his cell, Isaiah kept replaying everything Marilyn had said. Her final words, her broken voice, and the look on her face, not of fear, but of forgiveness. It haunted him more than the blood. One night, the guard who did evening rounds stopped by his door. Yo Monroe, got a letter for you. No return address. Just 2 words on the front. From Mom. Inside was a page torn from a spiral notebook. On it, written in looping cursive, was a message Isaiah had never seen, but instantly recognized. If the truth ever breaks you, I pray it also rebuilds you. Below that, in Marilyn's handwriting, I love you. Forever. Mom. Isaiah stared at the paper, hands shaking. For the first time in weeks, he didn't cry. He sat still, then whispered, I'm sorry. Not to the walls, not to the guards, but to her. Some truths tear us apart. Some reveal who we really are, and some arrive far too late. But when the blood dries, and the anger fades, what's left behind is never justice. It's just what remains. News of Marilyn Monroe's death didn't stay behind prison walls. The story spread like wildfire. Inmate kills transparent during visit. Tragedy in cell block C. Violent hate crime. Or broken system. Headlines didn't care about context. They only cared about clicks. Outside the prison, anger boiled. In the heart of Atlanta, protesters gathered, holding signs with messages like, her name was Marilyn. Protect trans lives. The system killed her, not just her son. Candles were lit. Speeches were given. Tears were shed for a woman no one really knew. But everyone could feel. Back inside the facility, Isaiah sat alone and solitary. He wasn't placed there as punishment. The warden said it was for his protection. In reality, it felt like another kind of cage. He no longer screamed at night. He no longer punched walls. He just stared. Meanwhile, Detective Caldwell continued digging. There was more to this than a single violent act. There were years of silence, buried files, and overlooked trauma. She found medical records showing Isaiah had been placed in over 11 foster homes, some of them flagged for abuse. She found court transcripts where Marilyn had begged for visitation rights, only to be denied because her gender identity made the judge uncomfortable. They punished her for trying to be a mother, Caldwell whispered, and punished him for being her son. Back at the district attorney's office, debates raged on. We can't set a precedent that justifies murder because someone was confused or surprised. And we can't ignore that this wasn't just a crime. It was the result of decades of institutional neglect. Some wanted life without parole. Others demanded psychological evaluation before trial. One voice suggested compassion. It was a legal tug-of-war, with a dead woman in the middle. Across the country, LGBTQ+ advocacy groups began sharing Marilyn's story. They didn't paint her as perfect. They painted her as human. She lived in fear. She loved her son. She tried to do right in a world that wouldn't let her. Marilyn wasn't just killed by Isaiah. She was killed by every system that failed to protect them both. And slowly, the conversation began to shift. Back in his cell, Isaiah was handed a small envelope. Inside was a folded photograph. It showed a younger Marilyn, before the hormones, before the wigs and makeup. She was holding a baby, wrapped in a blue blanket, smiling like nothing else in the world mattered. Written on the back, in faded pen, "My reason to fight. My reason to live." Isaiah. She didn't die hating him. She died hoping he'd remember who she tried to be. Not a liar. Not a monster. But a mother. The world outside kept shouting, debating, tweeting, marching. But inside 1 8x10 cell, a young man held a photo to his chest and whispered the one word that still made him feel human. Mom. The courtroom was silent, except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the sound of chains rattling with every one of Isaiah's steps. He walked in wearing an orange jumpsuit, wrists cuffed, ankles shackled. But it was his eyes that looked the most imprisoned. The district attorney opened first. This was not confusion. This was not trauma. This was murder, cold, deliberate, and public. The DA showed photos. A blood-smeared visiting room. A knife found hidden in a trash bin. Security footage of Isaiah lunging. No hesitation. He killed someone who loved him. And if we make excuses for this kind of violence, we open the door to more death. Then came the defense. Isaiah's public defender, Monica Reyes, stood tall, voice calm, but trembling beneath the surface. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not a simple case of right or wrong. This is about identity, pain, and a young man who was failed by everyone. She called psychologists, who described Isaiah's years of complex trauma. He'd been abused in group homes, bullied for not having a real mom, taught that masculinity was survival, and anything else was weakness. He didn't kill out of hate. He killed because the person he loved most was hidden behind a mask he didn't understand. And when that mask came off, he shattered. The courtroom wasn't moved by legal arguments. It was moved by testimony. Cameras weren't allowed, but every seat was filled. Journalists, activists, prison guards, even a woman who once shared a cell with Marilyn. She cried when shown Marilyn's photo. She kept that picture of her baby boy under her pillow for years. Another witness, Isaiah's former foster mom, said, "He used to wait by the window every Saturday. He always said, 'My real mom's gonna come get me.' And when she didn't, he stopped talking for weeks." Then it was Isaiah's turn. He stood up. His voice was raspy, like it hadn't been used in days. "I didn't mean to kill her. I did. But I didn't mean for it to happen like that." He paused, eyes locked on the floor. "When she said she was my mom, and I saw what she looked like now, I felt like I'd been lied to my whole life. Like, she died a long time ago, and this person was wearing her skin." His voice cracked. "But now I see. She never stopped loving me. I just didn't know how to love her back." The jury deliberated for 2 days. The final verdict: guilty of voluntary manslaughter. Not guilty of premeditated murder. He would serve 15 years, with possibility of parole in 7. Some called it justice. Others called it mercy. And some called it both. But the trial didn't just sentence Isaiah. It put an entire system on the stand. Why did no one help Marilyn reunite with her son earlier? Why weren't counselors there during visitation? Why does a young man think femininity is betrayal? Questions no courtroom could answer. As Isaiah was escorted out, he stopped and turned to the gallery. No one knows who he was looking for. Maybe a ghost. Maybe himself. But for the first time since the day it all happened, his lips moved. Just 2 words. "I'm sorry." 7 years passed. 7 long, gray, measured years. Each day in prison was a copy of the last. Until it wasn't. Because on a rainy Thursday morning, Isaiah got a letter. It was from a woman named Celeste, a trans advocate who once knew Marilyn from the halfway house. Inside was a photo. Marilyn, arms around a group of women. smiling, vibrant, free. On the back, someone had scribbled, "She talked about you every day. She forgave you long before you even knew what you did." That night, Isaiah didn't eat dinner. He didn't lift weights. He didn't even read. Instead, he picked up a pen. For the first time in years, he wrote a letter, but not to the parole board, not to the press, not to Celeste. He wrote to her, "Dear Mom, I finally believe you were real. I finally believe you loved me. I just wish I knew it sooner. I blamed you for leaving, for turning into someone I couldn't recognize. But I see now. You weren't running from me. You were running toward yourself. I think I get that now. Because in here, I've had to do the same. Every time I shut my eyes, I see your face. Not the one I saw that day, but the one I see in that photo. You were happy, and I destroyed that. But if there's anything left of me to give, I want to live the rest of my life, becoming someone you'd be proud of. I love you. I miss you. And I'm sorry. Isaiah." He folded the letter, slid it into an envelope. Then, he walked to the prison chapel. He didn't light a candle. He didn't pray. He simply sat in the back row, alone, still, and for the first time in years, at peace. Outside the prison gates, life went on. Marilyn's old room at the halfway house had been turned into a tiny memorial. A photo on the wall, her favorite scarf, framed, a quote underneath, "We are not what happens to us. We are who we choose to become afterward." Isaiah still had 8 years left to serve, but something had shifted. In the quiet hours of the night, the guards sometimes saw him writing, sometimes crying, and sometimes smiling, because even behind bars, he'd started to rebuild the one thing he thought he'd buried the day she died: hope. 15 years after the day Marilyn died, a man walked out of Ironwood State Prison, carrying nothing but a small box of letters, and the weight of everything he could never undo. Isaiah Bennett, now 40, stood still at the gate, not because he didn't know where to go, but because for the first time in his life, no one was watching him. No guards, no visitors, no mother, just wind and silence. He rented a room at a small boarding house outside Bakersfield, did odd jobs, volunteered at a local shelter. But there was one place he visited every Sunday, a quiet community garden fenced in behind a church. There, he planted peonies, not because they were his favorite, but because they had been hers, Marilyn's. The church didn't ask questions. They didn't know who he was, didn't know what he'd done, only that he came every week, wore gloves with holes in the fingertips, and always left a single flower on the bench before he left. Sometimes he'd sit for hours, scribbling in a worn leather journal, writing not about her, but to her, letters he never mailed, because the person who needed to read them already had. Inside him, one morning, as dew clung to the petals, a young boy from the shelter asked Isaiah, "Mister, why do you always come here alone?" Isaiah paused, smiled gently. "I used to think I killed someone who loved me," he said. "But now I know. I just couldn't see their love at the time." The boy didn't understand, but someday, he might. Years passed. The garden grew. So did Isaiah, not away from his past, but through it. Because healing didn't come in sudden revelations. It came in seeds, in roots, in things that took time. On the day Isaiah died, an envelope was found in his drawer, unsealed, unsent, addressed to my mother, wherever you are now. Inside it read, "I didn't get to grow old with you, but I've grown, and I hope you've seen that. If love is a garden, I've been tending yours ever since you left. And now, I think it's finally blooming. Somewhere, in a garden outside a forgotten church, a bench sits shaded by peonies, and on it, faintly carved into the wood, love survives us.